Welcome to the Jump Ball Podcast. I'm your host, Mo Dakhil, and today my guest is Yahoo Sports writer Seerat Sohi. If you're not reading her taking 5 pieces on a weekly basis, I don't know what's wrong with you. But today we jumped into the Eastern Conference, really talking about those 4 teams, Toronto, Milwaukee, Philly, Boston. So, you ready to tip it off? Seerat, how you doing?
Good. How about you?
I'm doing well. I am doing well. I'm happy the trade deadline's over. We can finally not have to be up 24 hours waiting for a Woj bomb at like 4 or 3 in the morning, depending on your time zone. And yeah, so I'm ready to get back to watching basketball again.
Yeah, that was one of the more discombobulating parts about it for sure. Just the fact that I felt like I was paying so much attention to what was going on Twitter that I didn't really know what was going on with games. And then after the deadline, I was kind of just wiped. And then, almost everybody in the league made a trade, so it was like everybody was playing without their players. So then after, I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna wait until the weekend to even see what is going on in the league.
Right.
Is that kind of what you went through?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of needed a second to like unwind. It was kind of
Right.
amazing. I mean, it was funny because through that whole process, like Philly beats Golden State, nobody even knows that game happened. Like just all these things happen on the court that it's like, nobody even noticed. So it's kind of just funny in that regard. But it did definitely wipe me. And I mean, 3 of the top 4 Eastern Conference teams all made big moves. Where do you want to start? You're the guest. What of the 4 teams? We're going to talk about all 4. Which one do you want to start with?
I guess we can start at home here with the Raptors. That'd
All
be
right.
pretty on brand, right?
Yeah, let's do it. You know, they make a big move. They trade Jonas Valanciunas, DeLon Wright, C.J. Miles. I'm sure there's a few other pieces I'm forgetting. For Marc Gasol. I mean, they kind of push all in now. You know, what were your thoughts when you first heard the trade and now having? I mean, they've played 2 games I think together. Now having seen it a little bit, what are your thoughts?
Well, my initial thoughts were, 2 of my favorite Raptors in the locker room got traded, so I was kind of sad about that. But overall, I mean, it's for the Raptors, it's a good trade. It's just, you're giving up DeLon Wright, who you probably weren't going to extend in the offseason just because you have money in Fred VanVleet and Kyle Lowry. You're just not going to invest that much money into point guards. It's just bad cap management. And to be honest, for as good as DeLon was last year, he was only kind of starting to show some progress and improvement around the end there with the Raptors. And with Jonas, longest tenured Raptor, you get a guy that is pretty much what Jonas would hope to be, and whenever he hits his prime. And even then, he's just never going to be what Gasol defensively was. So you understand why they make the trade. And with CJ, he was struggling as well, and you can pick up a shooting wing. So it was one of those trades where you totally get it from the Raptors side, and then from the Grizzlies side, you get a nice young player. You get 2 nice young players actually, and you get some cap relief, and you get to kind of. I guess this part doesn't really matter, but for the Raptors, they get to keep their system kind of plugging along in similar ways because of some of the similarities that JV and Gasol share. I'm not sure if the Grizzlies care too much about that part, but cap relief, couple of nice young guys for a guy who's 34 years old. That's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean it's a great get for the Grizzlies, and
And a second round pick. Oh, I'm surprised that they couldn't get a first round pick for him. Just shopping around the league. The Raptors probably didn't have one that they wanted to give up for Gasol, but just generally.
yeah, and it was funny though. I think first round picks were really hard to come by unless you were dealing with the Sixers, which
Right.
we'll get into when we talk
In
about
which case.
that trade. But they were willing to give up. You know, they gave up 2 for Tobias Harris, which we'll dive
Hmm.
into a little bit later. But it was a great haul, I think, for the Grizzlies, and I liked it for the Raptors in the sense of we don't know what's going to happen with Kawhi. I think there's no real read. It feels like it's
Hmm.
either he's staying in Toronto or going to the Clippers. Um, and I feel like they're just like, Masai, screw it. Let's go all in right now. Like, who knows what we're going to look like next year. And I applaud that. I like that go for it kind of risk. And
Yeah.
Marc Gasol's a good player, man. I mean, he's gotten older and stuff, but we saw it last night. I mean, he's still really a great passer. The Raptors really had like 30-something assists last night in their win against Brooklyn. And, I mean, he really helps in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, to your point about Masai, I guess he kind of got to go all in a way that really allowed him to still maintain the plan if Kawhi leaves, because Marc Gasol and Lowry's contracts run out at the same time. It's a 2020 free agency, I believe, and after next year. So it's really, you're riding them up for 1 year. You're probably going to try to trade them, see what you can get for rental on those guys. Probably not a lot, but maybe something. You probably get enough to get back the second round pick you gave up for him. And like we talked about, everything else in the deal you probably weren't going to keep anyway. So, it was an all-in bet that was somewhat hedged because you didn't have to give up OG Anunoby and you didn't have to give up Pascal Siakam, and those two are probably your future moving forward, especially Siakam. With
Right.
OG, you're not quite as sure, but it was a good hedge bet for, and that's probably about as much as you want to give for somebody like Gasol, and to your point, last night. I mean, what's the problem been with the Raptors this entire season? It's been Lowry and Kawhi kind of play in different ways. They can complement each other because they can spread the floor, both of them. They're both very smart players. They're not going to really get in each other's way, but they also haven't really found a way to mesh together. And the Raptors just turn into two different teams when they have Kawhi versus when they don't. And it looks like maybe Gasol was a missing piece because of how adept he is as a passer that can kind of connect those two different versions of the Raptors and hopefully turn them into a team that is both dynamic, can score in isolation, but can also pass the ball a lot as well. That's kind of what we saw last night. And, hopefully that's what happens for the Raptors, but we're going to have to see. It's pretty encouraging so far.
Yeah, and that was before the trade deadline. That was my biggest fear about the Raptors in the playoffs. I'm like, they're two different offenses, and they haven't really figured out how to marry that kind of style together. Because the thing is about Kawhi, I don't think people really realize, even in that year in San Antonio without Tim Duncan, like he became very much a one-on-one player, a very isolation heavy kind of guy and things like that. And everybody just kind of assumes he's in Pop's system and he's this great, all around guy, but he's a one-on-one scorer. So I think it was kind of it's a hard adjustment for the Raptors. And I think, again, you said it perfectly, better than I could. Gasol's kind of can be that bridge for both him and Lowry to kind of really kind of try to marry those styles together and could just add another level in the playoffs. But last question about the Raptors, really for that's a lie. I have more questions about the Raptors.
Well, hey, I'm your Raptors girl. You can keep going that way.
My thought is, like, where do you see him fitting in the lineup? He's not starting now, right? Like, they're still going with Ibaka and Siakam, right? And then bringing him off the bench.
Honestly, like I think he just kind of started in the JV role, where usually JV comes off the bench when it's kind of a more dynamic sort of matchup for that might be somebody more Serge would want to take, like somebody who can stretch the floor a little bit more. And it sort of just turned into a situation where Serge basically became the nominal starter because most of the league is like that. There's not a lot of matchups where JV is going to be an ideal starter. I think maybe, a guy like Drummond is one of them, but like those types of guys. And that's just not very common anymore. Just like a 7-footer that plods in the post as your starting center. So I think it kind of just started where JV started, which is to say he didn't start actually, but I think it's just an inevitability that he eventually starts. Like, you just look at the way he changes the complete dynamic of the offense, and it's just a matter of time. I think there's maybe going to be a little bit of deference to Serge, but at the end of the day, Serge agreed to swap bench and starting roles. They both him and JV did, so I don't know if it would really be that big of a problem for him to start. For him to not start, I guess we're kind of going to have to see. I'm sure we'll see a little bit of Serge and Gasol on the floor together, which is really interesting. Just seeing, like, we have 3 players who were kind of Western Conference rivals for a good 3 to 4 years,
Right.
and now they're all on the same team, and they've all kind of had interesting battles together. So that's kind of cool. And I think it's just, you look at how different it is. You just have to start him at some point, and I think they will. I don't know when that is. I think it's going to be sooner rather than later, just because, the end of the season is coming up, and you kind of just got to get your ducks in a row. So I think we'll see that, but it's probably, I don't know, it's probably a couple games away, or maybe it'll be one of those things where it was like how it was with JV, and they kind of switch between. But I think my opinion on this is very clear. All it took for me was like, okay, this guy is pretty good in a very limited sample size. Let's throw him in the starting lineup.
Right away, put him right in. You know,
Hmm.
what is? Well, see, that's what Philly did with Tobias Harris, right? Let's switch over to Philly here real quick and making that like middle of the night
Hmm.
trade for Tobias Harris. They sent out Wilson Chandler, Landry Shamet, 2 first-round picks, their own, and then the Miami unprotected 2021 pick, which I have. It looks valuable now, but I wouldn't be surprised if Miami finds a way to start getting some players. I never count out Pat Riley, so I don't know how valuable it will be in 2021. But they gave up a lot to get Tobias
Yeah.
Harris and my favorite guy Boban, and abiding by the rules that Tobias and Boban have to stay together and are no longer allowed to be split up.
Hmm.
So I'm happy both teams obliged with that one. But what was your
Yeah,
thought?
we've seen a lot of skirting of the rules over this trade deadline, and I'm just glad that some things are still sacred. That's all.
Right, right. We got to keep that together. I live for
Hmm.
that, and I'm waiting for them to put on a YouTube show. There needs to be a show those guys have together.
Oh, for sure. I think they should just drive around Philadelphia for the first month they're there and just try to figure out what the best Philly cheesesteak
Oh,
steak is.
that would be great. And then mixed in with dancing in between, because nothing makes me happier than Bo.
Hmm.
Listen, when I have a bad day, I put on Boban dancing. I'm not gonna lie. This is a weird thing,
I like
but
that. Self care.
yeah,
Self
just
care is very important.
sometimes you got to do it. You need something to pick you up. You got to put on Boban dancing. But I mean, what were your thoughts on that trade? I mean, that thing happened in the middle of the night. I mean, guys getting woken up at 2 in the morning to be told they're traded is something that doesn't happen very often.
No, that's no fun at all. Speaking to Miami, I think it's interesting. They're in a weird cap situation come 2021 because it's kind of when they start getting some stuff off the books. Like they won't be paying $100 million anymore, but they'll still have $70 million in the cap, and it's just going to be. I don't know what Pat Riley's going to be up to at that point. It seems like he's pretty tied to the fact that he doesn't want his team to tank, but at the same time, like I just don't really know what Miami's future is unless they can kind of offload a bunch of these guys. But if you offload guys, you got to give up picks.
Right.
I have a feeling that pick is going to be pretty good. I don't think that Miami's the type of team that doesn't outright tank, but they don't look like a playoff team right now, and that's when they have all these guys. So once they start coming off the books or start getting traded for picks or whatever it is that they end up doing, I mean, hey, like don't at the end of the day, like if somehow in the summer Riley just ends up fleecing a team like the Magic or the Wizards, like I would be the least surprised person in the universe. So no disrespect to Pat Riley or the Heat at
Right.
all. Just looking at what the reality of the situation is, I do think that's going to be a pretty good draft pick because I just don't know if there's really a clear path for them to get out of the mud right now. And that's kind of my only real beef with the Philly deal. They're obviously fantastic with them. Like they look incredible. They look dynamic. They're going to be impossible to guard. They're in cross matchups. It's just ridiculous. They're just like Tobias is an all-star in the East. There's no question about it, right? So you have a star-studded lineup here, and you're all in for the playoffs. And maybe we'll see what happens in the offseason. I totally get it. I kind of wish they had given up a little bit less because they gave up more for him than they gave up for Butler, who's a better player,
Right.
who they had a longer time to kind of convince him to stay because they traded for him in November, and now there's only a couple more months. It's a really, really short rental. Maybe there's something we know, that they know that we don't. If they wanted to keep one rule intact with Boban and Harris keeping them together. Maybe there's another one that they're breaking, who knows? But
Let's set
no,
the
Sorry.
record
I
straight.
don't.
I hit a
Well,
button on my computer.
oh, okay, okay. Is everything good?
Yeah, no, I was trying to look up how old Tobias Harris was, and I didn't know that Basketball Reference has an autoplay video.
Oh, okay. I think he's 26.
Yeah, yeah, he is after that video.
Yeah, I know you figured it out. He's a really young guy, and he's gonna keep getting better. And I think obviously, after you give up that much, you're gonna try to retain him. I was, joking about the tampering stuff earlier. Like I don't really know, but it is a lot to give up. I think you could have, from the same team under the same situation, probably been able to pay a little bit less for him. That said, on the court, this team looks fantastic.
Right. And that's
They look completely unguardable, just completely unguardable. Like what are you gonna do? Like you can load up with defenders. The entire East is loaded up with perimeter defenders, but I feel like Philly has found a way to say, well, it doesn't matter. We have more strong offensive players than you have perimeter defenders, and we can play them all at the same time.
yeah, and then like,
And we have Joel Embiid, who, by the way, you want to start switching? Whoops, like that. That's
right.
not going to work.
There's a lot of they're going to cause a lot of problems for teams, defensively trying to figure out how to guard these guys. The thing, I'm with you. They paid a big price, but to me, if they get to the conference finals or the finals, it's kind of worth it. I can't imagine they're going to lose both Butler and Tobias Harris. I know their goal they've said is to sign them both, which they might do, but I can't imagine to lose both. But they just look so good offensively, and that's only with very limited practice time. That's
Right.
they haven't looked great defensively, but again, I think that will get better as they go on, just because these guys need to learn the system and figure out what's the rotations that we're supposed to make and when are we switching and whatnot. And the other thing too, because they gave up. Everybody talks about depth. To me in the playoffs, depth isn't as important as it is in the regular season. And now you can always have 2 or 3 guys on the floor at any time when you stagger minutes that can put up big numbers, that can carry you for those minutes, that while the other guys are resting and whatnot. Like, this is a really impressive team that, talk about a first-year GM coming out and swinging for the fences. I mean, he makes a big move trading for Butler, makes a big move to get Harris. I like them trading Fultz and getting Jonathan Simmons. Like, I like him as a wing. He hasn't played that well this year, but he had a good year the year before in Orlando, and we saw what he did in San Antonio 2 years ago. I kind of like what they've sort of built. They're an impressive team. The only concern I have is if they have enough time to really gel and figure it all out. Now, I think Tobias is the kind of guy that looks like he just kind of goes with it. And he's ready to flow with anything. But if Tobias is your fourth option, you're a damn good team. Hey guys, let me interrupt the podcast for just a moment to tell you about my friends at brandactivemedia.com. When you go to one of your corporate events or a wedding and you have a photo booth with this green screen, that's these guys. They do a great job. They're the best at it. They're so good, in fact, the NFL just had them at the Super Bowl, and they're heading to NBA All-Star Weekend this weekend. So, if you need them, if you got an event coming up, corporate event, wedding, private party, whatever, and you want to kind of jazz it up, reach out to my friends at brandactivemedia.com and let them know that Mo from the Jump Ball sent you.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, there's no question. I mean, I think offensively, I don't really have too many questions. Then again, maybe we'll see it again in the playoffs where they start kind of scrunching in. At the end of the day, Tobias getting added in. I wrote about this after the Celtics 76ers Christmas game, just the fact that no matter what you do, if you're the Sixers, you have Simmons, Butler, and Embiid on the floor at the same time. You can only space the floor with 2 guys. Now, luckily, one of those guys happens to be probably one of the best, top 5 floor spacer in the league in JJ Redick, and then and Tobias can shoot the crap out of the ball too, and he's definitely more dynamic. So, that definitely adds another dynamic to their offense. Defensively, yeah, you just kind of have to wait to see what works and what doesn't, especially with the way that Philly plays defense. Like, they try to be really dynamic with stuff. They want to switch some things. They want to go over on a lot of other things. Like, they have, I think mostly with Embiid, they want to drop back on their pick and rolls, and then they want to kind of do it matchup based, which is great for the playoffs. So if they can kind of get used to that, that's great. Only time will tell, though. So we're going to kind of have to see. But 2 games so far, only 30 minutes, but they have a net rating of 23.
Which is good.
So I don't know, is that good? It's pretty good, right?
It sounds good. I don't know.
Yeah. I will say though, I just wanted to look this up right now just to see what it was. And the best net rating in the league goes to the Pelicans with AD on the floor. So I don't know. Apparently, this whole chemistry stuff doesn't really matter that much because the 4th highest team on that list is the Lakers with with Ingram and Kuzma as the two, and LeBron, McGee and Bullock, but not trade candidates. Although Bullock is, but yeah, like it's obviously like I'm throwing these in, so it's not like the stuff is set in stone and that Philly's going to be fine no matter what. But very encouraging early signs from them.
Right, I'm with you on that. Let me ask you last question about Philly, and this will be my last question about Philly. What do they have the best starting five in the East?
Yeah, probably. I think that's hard to deny. They have five guys who could be all-stars.
Right. I mean that's kind of basically it. And JJ Redick is shooting an absurd 70% since the trade. So
right, yeah. I guess now that Tobias on the team, all that all-star like love that JJ would have gotten wouldn't have happened.
Right.
So I guess you got to go 4 all-stars, and even then, it's because JJ's in the East, and it was kind of like that Kyle Korver type pick that happened a couple years ago.
Yeah, when Atlanta had like 15 all-stars. The honest thing, I think Tobias should have been an all-star in the West anyways. I thought he was probably one of the biggest snubs. I know they put Clay in there, but I would have had Harris in there instead of him.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. I mean, Clay struggled, and you've got enough Warriors in there. I think probably just the fact that Clay's going to the All-Star game for the 3-point contest and just reputation. It's a little bit hard just because, especially with a guy that's a shooter and he's struggling. It's like, well, that's gonna come back, But yeah, I get your point. I get your point for sure.
So let's talk about the other team that made the trade. A trade was the Milwaukee Bucks, who lead the East. Everybody has been going nuts about them. Ben Golliver wrote a great piece on them in the Washington Post, calling them a juggernaut. They added more shooting by basically getting Mirotic for, in the end, for Thon McCour, who ended up going to Detroit, and Stanley Johnson went to New Orleans, and a couple of second-round picks. That was a hell of a – again, that's a great – they did not give up much to get him. And
right, because you can't develop. You're not on the timeline to be developing second round picks anymore. Anyway, like first rounder is a little bit different, but the second rounders, if you're trying to win,
yeah, they just
really don't have a shot.
I mean, the odds, we've hipster NBA has kind of gotten into like second round picks matter so much. I'm like, they do and they don't. Like, let's pump the brakes. I get it. So we've had some great players who have been second round picks, but. Like there's a lot more misses than our home runs. So,
well, I think it's hard to just find the combination of culture and time to develop a second round pick. So if you have a bunch of second round picks, you're probably not very good. So do you have the infrastructure for these guys to develop? Right? Like, do you have veterans? Do you have a good situation around them? Do you have people who want them to succeed? Is it a toxic environment? You don't really know. And like, do they even have an anchor to allow themselves to kind of find the one thing that lets them have a skill to build off of, where they're trying to do everything because the team's so bad? And on the other hand, if you're in a good team, it's just so hard to break through as a second rounder. So as much hypothetical value as they have, it's just sometimes I think just politically it's hard for second rounders to pan out. You just can't really justify giving them the time that you'd give a first rounder.
Yeah, and developing somebody takes a while. Laker fans are learning that the hard way.
Yeah, wait, can we actually do a rant on this? Not involving Lakers fans slightly, but here's the thing. Like, we all I think about D'Angelo Russell, I think about Buddy Hield. Why is there already this resurgent storyline on these guys? This was the path they were supposed to be on. Like the fact that we're seeing them succeed right now does not speak to them overcoming adversity at some previous point. Not to take anything away from them, and to their credit, they actually did, because of all the criticism they got for not panning out right away. They're on their timelines. This is what they're supposed to be doing. It's completely normal. The problem is us and our lack of patience and our seeing potential in a rookie season or in college, or seeing highlight reels and thinking immediately that things are going to pan out, because all we do now is have these fantasy ideas of what a team is going to look like. And then when a young player doesn't live up to whatever fantasy we had in our heads of them, we completely denigrate the idea that they could ever pick up and have productive careers again. And we're just seeing it over and over again with a bunch of these guys that are in their third and fourth years, where it's like, oh yeah, he managed to figure it out somehow. Like, yeah. Yeah, you know what happened? He turned 21.
Right.
He was 19. You know, like,
He matured. It sort of happens in
right.
life. I'm with you on that, and I'm a little bit slightly different just in the sense of some of these guys get in situations where they're just not in a great position to succeed. Like D'Angelo Russell's a great example
Right.
in the sense of the Lakers are not a development organization. They've never been. I mean, even when they've drafted Kobe and all that, but Kobe was an outlier, and his development was because of himself and not really
Right.
coaches or anything like that. With D'Angelo Russell, like, I don't know if he reaches this, staying with the Lakers. I think the trade kind of woke him up to, I have to change my approach, like the way I go about things and whatnot and stuff like that. So I'm not sure. Sometimes the change of scenery is important, and part of that is because of the ridiculous expectations we put on these kids when they first get here, and we think they're going to. The problem is everybody thinks development is linear. That
Right.
it just goes in a straight line, Jason Tatum has a great year last year, and the expectation is that he's going to make the leap this year. We never know when the leap is coming. There's no
Right. Not everybody is Devin Booker, you know.
right.
Like, that's one of the few players that I can think of, or Karl Towns. And Towns gets plenty of crap for not being, the best possible player he could be by now. And it's like, well, he was drafted in 2015. That's not that long ago.
No, it's not. And he was 19 when he was drafted.
Right.
I'm still not the best Mo I could be, and I'm way older than him. So it's not like it just takes a while.
Yeah, you just see this with a lot of guys. Like, I just started like looking down the draft list because I started thinking about this a little while ago because I can't remember why, because I think I was looking at some old draft picks, and I was just looking at these guys that are supposedly resurgent. Buddy Hield, Jamal Murray is in his third year. How is this? I don't know. It's just like Jamal Murray figures it out. I'm like, yeah,
That's what they're supposed to do.
that's what happens.
Yeah, that's what they're
I'm
supposed
sure.
to.
I think Moody is a great example now too. I mean, yeah, he's putting up a bunch of empty buckets right now, but next year Jamal Moody is going to come off and be a six man for somebody, and everybody's going to be shocked.
Right. I mean, we put this weird expectations in the sense of these guys should succeed on our timeline, and
Right.
their success is never on our time. Same thing with Ben Simmons and his jumper. Everybody's like, why doesn't he have a jumper? Yo, he's been in the league for 2 years, like a year and a
Right.
half, really. Like,
Well, I think with Simmons a little bit different. I mean, we saw him shoot 1-3, and it was not pretty. I mean, there's a lot of problems with that jumper, just the fact that he wouldn't shoot it. But I am glad that he's starting to, and I think maybe in a couple years he'll have one.
right. But
I'm guilty of this stuff as much as anybody else is. Like, I was very critical of Ingram in his first 2 years in his career, and there's been a lot of other players that I've dismissed way too early, and I'm starting to learn. Like, no, I mean, come on, they're just so young.
we all do that. And but
Yeah.
again, even back to Simmons, like Blake Griffin, it took him several years to develop a jumper.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it takes a while, and everybody grows at a
Yeah,
different rate.
Well, you know what? Blake is actually kind of the risk, I think. Blake developed his jumper too late because he developed it to be able to stay level with what he has right now. And with Simmons, you would kind of hope that he develops it earlier so that he can just be this dominant LeBron-esque force, because that if he has a jumper, that's essentially what his ceiling is. So you kind of hope that it happens. Because I don't know, if Ben Simmons ends up having the same career as Blake Griffin, I mean, no offense to Blake, he's had a great career, but looking at where Ben is right now, he's a generational talent. You would hope that he would have a better career than Blake, right?
Well, I hope so, and I think he will. Obviously injuries and all that stuff aside, I think he will. And the other thing too is he does so many other things so well, anyways, that like his jumper doesn't have to be wet. He's never going to be JJ Redick or Tobias
Right.
Harris or anything like that. Like, he needs to just be able to be just enough of a threat where teams can't just, like LeBron did, jump way
Right,
into the paint, against him and wait for him to make a move. Although I think there's as a coach, I think you could take advantage of that by just running a dribble handoff, and there's nobody to really defend JJ coming off the screen at that point. But that's a whole other.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of teams start to do that. I think probably they got that from Draymond starting to do
Yeah,
that, and the more Simmons improves as a screener, the better that's going to be as well.
right.
Draymond, like the best part with Draymond is he's a brick wall.
Oh,
So
dude, he's unbelievable. I mean, his screen setting's my favorite skills. I like weird things, so that and Boban dancing videos.
right.
Last ad, guys, and this is one of my favorite places in all of Los Angeles. If you're in LA, you got to check out Gelateria Uli's. You can't go wrong. They have amazing flavors. It's always seasonal. Right now, they have olive oil. They have my favorite speculoos cookies. They have 2 locations. One in downtown Los Angeles in the Spring Arcade, in between 5th and 6th Street on Spring. And the other one in the Beverly Grove area on 3rd Street, just past the Grove. I highly recommend you check them out. Gelateria Uli's. But we did get sidetracked. The Bucks. Where do you see the Bucks? Like, how do you view this team? Are they this unbelievable Eastern juggernaut? Or, are you not as high as everybody else on them? What's your views on them?
Here's my only thing with the Bucks. I love everything else they're doing, the way that they're attacking the rim, the way that they're defending the rim. They've decided to essentially make this trade-off where they've decided that, okay, we're not going to take everything away. They've basically taken the opposite of the Jason Kidd approach, where you try to take everything away and then you end up not really defending anything. They're saying we're just going to defend the rim and then hopefully we can close out the three-point shooters. And they have the length to kind of hedge that bet pretty well. And then on the other end, you have Giannis, so you can just continue to make line drives towards the rim and hope that he can just continue to dunk over 3 people, which, I enjoy, he enjoys, we all love it.
Right, yes.
It's great. My only worry with them is that Giannis's jumper might be a year away still. Like, it could kind of end up being a similar situation to last year, what we saw with Simmons, obviously to a lesser extent, because, Giannis can hit those and he can shoot those. Or at least he's willing to shoot those, but we haven't seen enough improvement, I think, from that part of his game. That's the thing that worries me. And from there, that's when you start wondering, okay, can Chris Middleton step up and be that second guy? Can Eric Bledsoe? Like, they have a bunch of candidates to do that, but nobody that for sure will. I think Middleton has a skill set. I'm not sure if he's had like the consistent reps and experience to kind of continue to do that. He's obviously a great tough shot maker. Bledsoe is explosive, and he's basically had a second lease on his career in Bud's offense. So I'm with them. I'm more curious than anything. But that said, I love the Mirotić trade. It's just what a perfect fit. To spread the floor a little bit more, moves his feet reasonably well. Smart player, can stop and pop. He can make the smart pass. He's gonna. I haven't gotten a chance to check out the Bucks since they made that trade, but I imagine he's gonna fit in like a glove, right?
Yeah, I mean he slides right in perfectly for what they do. I'm not as high on the Bucks as everybody else for a lot of the reasons you said. For me, I think the way you kind of defend the team is you just say, hey, Giannis, we're going to play you straight up and we're not going to help off anybody else. As good as much everybody talks about them as a great 3-point shooting team, they're about league average for what they connect. They just shoot a crap ton of them. And that's kind of the thing. And if you kind of start limiting those opportunities, you can help off of some guys. Bledsoe, I think's, a 30% or low 30s at 3-point percentage. You can help off of him and things like that and add all sorts of other ways to junk it up. But I think that's kind of how I would want to defend him. Now, don't get me wrong. It's not easy. It's not going to.
No. I mean, hey, if it turns out that they end up being in the finals, not surprised.
Yeah, no.
I think I've said this by the way about every team, but the Bucks, luckily for them, it might be the team that I have the least faith in this year to make the finals, but they're also the one that doesn't have the pressure to make them. All 3 of the other teams in the conference right now that we've talked about, in Boston, Philadelphia, and Toronto, if they don't make the Eastern Conference Finals, their season is a failure. They got to start thinking about some stuff, which, situationally sucks because you understand why they don't make it. There's 3 teams that feel that pressure and are very, very talented. But at the same time, Boston is going to be questioning a lot of stuff about themselves, and Kyrie's free agency is coming out. Toronto, it's self-evident with Kawhi and Gasol and all, the big bet that they made. And same with Philly, all the stuff that they gave up to to kind of get the guys they have now. So all those teams have a ton of pressure right
Yeah,
now.
and the other thing for me with the Bucks is I have two things with them. One, the talent disparity after Giannis is, so I mean, I like Middleton. I don't know if he's a number two guy. It's so wide that it worries me a bit with that team, and they've never been out of the first round. The majority of these guys have very little playoff experience.
Right. Yeah. There's a lot and they are younger, and I think I have long-term faith in them. I
Yes.
totally have long-term faith in them. So I have faith in Giannis. He works harder than anybody in the league. He's just a gym rat. Like, I think he'll figure it out. Bud's a smart coach. The organization is doing smart things. They're relatively young. I think Middleton, if he's not that guy this year, I think he definitely has a skill set to become that guy.
Right. I mean,
So it might be a matter of just getting some battle scars.
yeah,
For a lot of these guys, for all these guys, almost.
and that's what I think it is. You got to kind of get beat up a little bit more.
Yeah.
In that regard, and I think you can say the same thing about Philly too. In that sense, I know the pressure's on them to make the conference final minimum, but also those two kids, very little experience between those two.
Well, I mean, it's interesting, actually. I mean, I think the kids have more experience than the adults in the situation, actually.
Well,
They've, they got beat up pretty bad by Boston.
That's true.
That was an experience. That's the type of thing that you look to, that you kind of hope that a young player goes through, and that's not really something that Butler has been through, really in a serious way yet. And I think it's actually gonna be interesting to see him because of how competitive he is as he gets later into playoff series. Like, is there just that natural gear kicking in, and kind of the same deal with Tobias? I mean, has Tobias been in a playoff series before?
I don't think he has.
I don't think so.
No, because I don't think he's made one with Detroit. So and
Yeah, maybe one. I don't think so though.
If it was a first.
Either way,
it wasn't memorable.
Exactly.
It wasn't memorable.
Exactly. Yeah.
Real quick, what do you think of Boston? Obviously, they didn't make a move. We touched on it, of the pressures on them with Kyrie. You have Marcus Morris coming out going like, man, it ain't fun anymore. What do you think of the Celtics and kind of the situation they're in right now?
It seems like a really fraught situation. I think you have one guy in Kyrie who thought that he could make this team his leadership experiment without having that much experience as a leader. And then I think there probably wasn't an appropriate level of foresight into how much leadership really would have been necessary this season, with the amount of guys that have individual reasons for wanting to have that playing time, wanting to have touches, and the inevitability of the fact that they couldn't. You have Hayward wanting to come back from an injury, working his way back, probably hoping to eventually be the guy that he was, but he's not going to get the same level of, I guess, attention to bring him back to that. So he's kind of being forced to find that in the flow of a larger offense. You have Jaylen Brown, who wants to make the leap. Jason Tatum was supposed to be turning into a star this year after his breakout season.
Right.
You have Kyrie's whole sort of, proving that he can do this without LeBron. And just his play style is kind of like that. Really, the only guy who doesn't have any inner conflict between individual goals and team goals this season is Al Horford, who is a great leader, but missed a good deal of the season. So it's, just a guy can be in a locker room, but if he's not playing, he just doesn't have the same voice. And then when you think about Kyrie kind of wanting to take some of that mantle as well, it was kind of a situation that was fraught for this, and it's easy to say in hindsight we should have seen it coming, but I don't think anybody really did. I think everybody saw this team as being the number one seed, and that was going to be the favorite for the playoffs this year.
Yeah.
That's it. I think they can still figure it out. It's kind of just a matter of, I think when the playoffs come up, these are really competitive guys, and I think, maybe part of them will say, you know what, this is getting serious now. I need to forget about what my own hangups are.
I just find them to be a very fascinating team in the sense of starting the season, I was concerned that they had too many pieces. I wasn't sure how the young kids would handle going from having a big role to having a lesser role this year. I wasn't sure how you're going to make all the pieces work because a lot of guys were probably expecting playing time. And I've seen it where guys kind of get a little, I don't want to say greedy, but just kind of ambitious. Like they're ready for more.
Right.
They think they can handle more. And so it's hard, and you're sitting there going, well, I was in this position last year and we were winning games, and Kyrie's learning how hard leadership is. It's funny, how, he calls LeBron to apologize. Like everybody else, I kind of wish he didn't say that out loud, but, but that idea of like, I get it now. I was the dick when we were in Cleveland. Like I was the jerk. And now I'm trying to.
Well, here's the thing. Was he? What was he actually, or is there something to the fact that all these veterans maybe need to give the young players a little bit more rope?
Well, I think it's hard. I think it's like when you're trying to explain to a kid something of like, hey, don't put your hand on that hot stove. It hurts,
Right.
And the kid's like, man, screw you. That ain't hurt. Then, ow, it hurts, kind of not.
Yeah, I think there is definitely an extent to that. I think maybe they take contention a little bit for granted in ways that maybe older guys like Morris and Kyrie don't. But at the same time, these are really talented young players. And, maybe if Kyrie was able to change the way that he played a little bit in terms of not always being so score first, that things would look a little bit different.
Yeah, and
that's a big part about being a leader. It's like part of the reason I think that it's been hard for him is not even just his own mental makeup, which I think would actually be fine. I mean, he seems like a very intelligent guy. It's just the fact that I think from certain positions, it's hard to be a leader. It's hard to be a leader when you're the guy taking all the shots. I think that's why a guy like Horford is a lot more suited for it, because the way that he plays, you have to listen to him. When he says you have to sacrifice your touches, you have to listen to him, because that's a guy who sacrificed everything for this team. When it's coming from Kyrie, I think a player that doesn't want to hear it could just blow it off. Like, well, what's it like? You don't understand because you take all the shots in the world that you want. And the sentiment could be the same, and it could still be for team, for the good of the team at the end of the day, no matter who it comes from. And maybe that's something the players just need to kind of get over. But a lot of this stuff comes, like, it's human nature. Like we hear, all of us hear things differently from different people. It's like you hear the same advice your entire life, but at a certain point in the right moment, right time, right person, you actually will take it. And I think Kyrie just might be a bad messenger because of his play style and the fact that he's a free agent this upcoming season, and a whole bunch of reasons that aren't really his fault. They just have to do with who he is.
Right. And I think we saw a great illustration of what you're talking about in that Orlando game when they lose in crunch time and the ball goes to Jason Tatum. Like, coming out of the timeout, he was fighting with Brad Stevens about it. Personally, I didn't like the play myself either, if it's supposed to go to Horford, then a handoff to Kyrie, just because I didn't think there was a lot of time. I think there was like 3 seconds on the clock. That's a lot of action to try to make happen quickly.
Right.
But
yeah.
the fact
I think the one solace of the play like that is if you don't get it to Kyrie, then Horford can just turn around
and shoot. But they got a decent look out of it from Tatum, and for Kyrie to kind of start going into Gordon Hayward and chastising him about it, like, that's not a good look, and that's
no, it's not.
And that's
leadership. Also something that if you need to communicate, there are just better ways to do that.
Yeah, not so public and right after. Just go in the locker room being like, yo, hey, what? First off, what happened on that play? Why didn't you hit Horford? Like, what did you see? Like, how about having that conversation, before you start trying to chew the guy out. And second, if you're Tatum, how do you feel about that? You're like, yo, I had a good look, I just missed. What do you want me to do? I find them to be a very interesting team. And kind of like you said, I'm very curious to see if they just figure it out in the playoffs. Again, to me, Toronto and Boston have the most playoff experience. All those guys for the most part.
Right. And it's treated both of those teams in very different ways.
Very different ways. And the other two teams don't. And for me, I could see really any 4 team making it to the finals, and I could see a reason why all 4 or one of why a team would miss the finals. It's pretty chaotic. I don't know. I'm not going to demand it, but if you have a prediction, now would be a good time to give it out, Seerat. I don't. I'm copping out. I'm going to say it's any 4 team.
No, I mean, okay, I can't. I'm not going to say it if you won't say it.
Well, it's just because I can't really call it. That's the only thing I say. It's just when people
me neither. Me neither. That's why, I mean, I'm kind of tempted to cop out too, but I think we should both just go in on this thing together.
Okay. Wow, we're just gonna jump off the bridge together. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm I'm gonna go with Philly. I've always said
All right.
having the best talent, having the top players matter. I think that's kind of a big thing for me in the playoffs. The phrase of in the playoffs you play 8, trust 7. I think they have the most talent, the best starting lineup in the Eastern Conference. I'm gonna go with Philly. Who you got? Since you forced me into this, Boston. Oh.
Well, I think they'll figure it out, and even if they don't, playoff games end up being pretty close, and it's impossible to play in the Garden. And Kyrie is the best shot maker in the East.
Yeah, and he's the best closer.
Things matter in the playoffs.
He's the best closer, I think, in the Eastern Conference. The way I look at it. That's it. I mean, we covered everything we needed to cover. I know I kept you a little longer than you needed to, than you would have liked, and I apologize. But Seerat, plug your stuff.
Yeah, that's fine.
What do you got coming? What's coming down the pipeline? I already talked up in the intro the Taking 5, and people should be reading that. What else you got?
Okay, yeah, I actually got John Collins, who will be in the dunk contest this coming Saturday. I got to spend some time with him, so I'll have an article coming out about him this week, and then from there, I guess just look out for All-Star stuff. Perfect.
Well, be sure to follow Seerat on Twitter. Follow her writing on Yahoo Sports. I mean, she's awesome. This is why I've been begging her to come on for a while. I know she's been busy, and I'm super happy you were able to come on. Thank you again so much for coming on the Jump Ball.
Thanks for having me.
That's it for our show. Be sure to rate us, like us, leave reviews on iTunes, SoundCloud, Google Play, Stitcher, wherever else you go to listen to your podcast. Have yourselves a great week.